This is the MFGMonkey podcast. We sit down with leaders and innovators in the industry to talk about manufacturing, business, and the stories behind their successes. I'm your host, Dustin McMillan, owner and founder of McMillan Co. Welcome, Katie Smith with Wild Path Consulting. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am doing amazing. We were just talking before this. I just got back from your neck of the woods out in Montana, and still as cold here as it is in Montana. So
Yeah, you came during a really good snow spell, but
yep,
a very cold spell,
yeah,
which I think is better than what you had last year, which was warm and no snow.
exactly. We'd much rather have it cold and have a lot of snow. So it's so beautiful out there. I'm jealous that you get to live there.
Yes, I feel very fortunate every day to be
Yeah.
out in the snow looking at the mountains.
So tell us again how you ended up in Montana, because or did you grow up there? I forget now.
So I grew up on the East Coast in New
That's right.
Hampshire,
That's
and
right.
I was an outdoor guide for a while, and I had known about this cross country ski ranch called Lone Mountain Ranch. And so one winter, some of my friends were heading back out to work in Big Sky, and I thought, hey, I bet I can teach Nordic skiing at this ranch. And I thought I'd just do it for a season, and then it's been like 16 years.
Yeah.
I worked for them, winters guiding, taking people into the park, into Yellowstone National Park, and taking people in the summers as a wrangler, so taking people out horseback riding, hiking, before I decided to get serious and do more serious business type things.
It's definitely a place that can suck you into doing non-serious fun stuff for sure. So
Yeah.
it was hard to leave and get on the plane, even though it was 35 below when we got up in the morning to take off out of West Yellowstone. But man, it is absolutely stunning out there.
Yeah.
So we were fortunate enough to get in a couple days of skiing at Big Sky, and then ride some snowmobiles down in West Yellowstone, which had its own adventure. We had a heli flight off the mountain. My girlfriend got hurt, and
Oh
we had to fly her
no.
to Idaho. And then the next day, I kind of spilled myself in the parking lot. Not nearly as fun of a story, but probably cracked a rib or two. So, but
Oh my
yeah,
God.
she had a heli flight, and she's doing fine. So, just
Oh, I'm
now
glad
she's
she's
got a
okay,
better
but
story than me. Yeah, yeah, it was pretty scary for for a minute. So,
I mean, the
but
hard thing is it's so remote.
it is.
So it's
Yeah,
like that's really your option there's not a whole lot that we can do. So,
yeah. The
oh my
the
gosh.
paramedics got to the hotel because she hit a tree actually and was having a really hard time breathing, and she's a nurse, and she felt that there might be some internal bleeding with how hard she hit. And the paramedics
Oh
got there,
my
and they're like, "Yeah,
gosh.
we're just gonna have to fly you. We're 2 hours away from the closest hospital." So
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my
but
gosh.
fun story. So and
Yeah.
she's all good. So no big deal there, right? But
Yeah.
um, I guess since you talked about getting into serious stuff, tell us a little bit about your company. So you have a consulting company for marketing directly towards manufacturing, right?
Yes, yep, manufacturing, especially B2B. So, I it's called Wild Path Consulting, and it's really a marketing strategy. So, helping companies you're working on you've got your supply chains figured out, you've got your operations figured out, and now you're ready to scale, but you're like, okay, what do we do with this marketing? What does this mean? How do I do this efficiently and effectively? So that's where I come in. I assess a company, look at what you have going on, who are your customers, where do you want to grow, what are your business goals, and then I can build a custom marketing strategy that really ties into everything from the C-suite down through the production floor, so that so there's no waste, there's no marketing just for marketing's sake or following trends. Everything that we're putting out there is really directly related to what your customers need, when they need it. Everybody, there's a whole sales process, a
Hmm.
whole sales cycle. And so we're really here to support sales, really fill that pipeline, but make it custom, make it tailored so that everything has a purpose.
Sure. What can you tell us you know, for lack of a better term, a white paper or case study of where you've helped somebody do just that?
Sure, sure. So, I've been working with a metal manufacturer, Great Northern Metal here, and the guys who started it, we had worked together. I worked for another larger metal manufacturer, um, when they broke off. I had broken off doing my own thing, and they were kind of at that point. They had really dialed in how they were running their business, which is it's a really great, smart way to do it in our industry. Where we are in Southwest Montana, there's a huge building boom, and so they wanted to focus on sustainable growth. They
Hmm.
had learned a lot from the mistakes that the company had made previously, and they really didn't know, they didn't have any kind of marketing operations. They had a website and they were doing some advertising, but the company they were using was pretty generic and it wasn't really a good focus with them. So they brought me in to build up the system, the marketing system. What do we need? How can we take advantage of our market without exploding, right? Because that's the whole thing. If we You can give me an unlimited budget and I can fill your pipeline, but how does that go down the rest of the chain? Like, can you fulfill it? Um, can you get the supply? What does that look like? So I take all of that into account, take into account what's important for them, how do we want to grow. And then the great thing about being a fractional chief marketing officer is that I'm inside the company. So even though I'm not like directly on staff, that's really how I operate. So
Hmm.
I can pull in different agencies. For them, we pulled in a full service marketing agency that I had a relationship with, and I become the translator. So I understand very clearly what the business goals are, what they need, and I also understand what the marketing team needs to be really successful. So I make sure that everybody's getting what they need, that we're really focusing on what's most important, and that my clients' needs are really being articulated well. And that way, if we're going to use an agency, if we're going to use a contractor, everything's really clear. The other thing that I always end up doing is creating like a brand identity, which is something that I did for them, which really just solidifies your idea of what the company is. It helps you make decisions. Is this on brand? Is this not? Like, so that you don't end up getting this wide scope creep. We really identify who the customer is, so that we can be really clear in our communication. It just really helps us make decisions. So putting in a lot of those processes for them, getting a really good team on board and staying really focused. So for them, we decided that we wanted to focus on contractors in the area and not really homeowners, because the way that their business is set up, they can do a lot of bigger projects in a shorter amount of time. And that was, the biggest kind of bang for the buck was working with contractors. And they'd all been contractors. They've been in the industry for a long time. So we really focused all of our communication towards contractors. So that meant we had to have high level communication. We couldn't just be putting out social media posts or blog posts that sounded like you could find them on Pinterest.
Right.
So finding ways to work with our agency who have no building experience, being clear on voice, being clear on tone, and making sure that we show up in the same way throughout every communication, from website to email to social media. And then we are looking at long-term build. So we really focused on SEO, because they had a lot of, like, word of mouth stuff was covered. They had a lot of relationships. So if we wanted to build extra, we focused on this long-term SEO that we think would bring us sustainable growth, so the company could grow slowly,
Hmm.
and without exploding. So what we ended up with, I've been working with them for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and depending on the year, we've had between 20 to 50% growth
Wow.
year over year, and All of our stats are, I mean, the stats are kind of crazy because we went from like a kind of a crappy website to like this really nice website with really good leads. So we have like a 400% growth,
Wow.
which, which is really good,
Yeah.
especially when you're starting with nothing. But with website leads, we've had just this really sustained growth. And a lot of it is just really understanding the market, understanding your customer, and then delivering on that without delivering extra. So I
Right.
say we don't do trends, we are trailblazers.
I like it. And their website, I got on your website and now I'm on theirs, and it is. It's good. It's clean. It's easy to navigate. All that fun stuff.
Yeah,
So,
and we
and I
just decide what do the contractors need, what do our customers need, and then we create it for them. So we have a
yeah,
whole like blog section where it's actually useful information and not just a bunch of fluff.
yeah. Well, and I guess tell us. You said that you're driving traffic to the website through SEO, and the building market in Montana is
Hmm.
exploding. Is that where most of that's driven? Is just SEO, local search, or local within 50 or 100 miles?
I just got a lead from Australia, so
Wow. And how they deal with that? Are they even dealing with it?
no,
No.
they
Yeah.
that's a little bit too far. But it's actually brought them in because they specialize in like custom trim, custom
Yeah.
colors, things like that. So they've gotten contacts from people on the East Coast who are like, can you do this specific custom piece for me? Because they
Yeah.
can. So they'll figure that stuff out. But the SEO is not so much local. Like we do, there's a little. I'd say more of the advertising that we do. We also
Mm-hmm.
do we do advertising, and I work directly with our videographer to
Mm-hmm.
everything is just specific and targeted to contractors, what they feel, what they need, and I'm very controlling about that. So, so we do a lot of like social media ads. They pull in things really well. We will do YouTube with some of our ads, and those are it's interesting because YouTube is really good for kind of like that nurture piece where people
Yeah.
just to stay top of mind. So when we do our advertising, we kind of focus it on local because that makes the most sense. But then the SEO is sort of like it's really search specific. So what
Yeah.
kind of information do people need? And we kind of pull in the idea um, we talk with the sales team to see like what are people asking, what are you explaining 7 times a day that you don't want to explain anymore, and
Mm-hmm.
then we work with our agency to find search terms that match up. So we're creating content that is useful, that people are looking for, people need, or that our sales team can use. So everything that we do is multi-purpose, which really cuts down on the waste. So if we're going to create a blog post, it's going to be something that our sales team can use. Um, Whether they're trying to answer a question for somebody or it's a big project and they want an excuse to like kind of reach back out, if it's like a long-term sales process. And then it's also because why wouldn't you put something out there that's not um, perfect for SEO. So
Yeah.
everything that we do is multi-purpose. Whenever we have these videos for ads, and then we can chop them up. I always make sure that we have access to all the video. We do one shoot, and then we cut that up into lots of different size bits that we can use on YouTube. We could use on our website if we needed. We can use for ads. So everything is really multi-purpose and multifaceted and really fits into that map. But that's why it's so important to have that customer journey map because then once you know kind of how you want people to move through your pipeline, you can start to figure out what pieces of content do we need, how can we repurpose this, so we can be really efficient. If we were just sort of coming up with ideas and executing them,
Yeah.
there'd be a lot of waste. There'd be a lot of single use thing, or we'd be it's like you're throwing spaghetti against the wall and some of it sticks
Sure.
and some of it doesn't. So we try to avoid that.
Well, and it is interesting because they are manufacturing and they're going after a totally different market than what we typically see in the Midwest is we're very industrial, and 99% of the stuff that we work with that's manufacturing is going into another manufacturing situation where these guys are manufacturing in the building industry, and you've captured that target market and crushed it. And I know that that's going on in our area. Something that I honestly didn't think about at all is going after that market. But the architecture out in Montana is just so much different than what we have in the Midwest. In my opinion, better, but it is
I
really
mean,
really cool and very industrial looking. I love it.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it's good for that.
yeah.
But, I would approach that, it, you know, that same way that I approach them would be how I
Hmm.
would approach any business, which is
Yep.
really like, who are your customers, especially with B2B. Yeah, I think we get stuck in B2B with feeling like we have to be like very one way and very corporate, and we end up feeling like
Hmm.
we have to fit in this box. Um, and that's just not true. And I think actually it's easy to differentiate yourself by just going a little bit outside that box.
Yeah.
Um, but you start by looking at who are your customers, what are the business goals, what's the kind of like the feeling and the ethos of the business, and then you match that to create a brand identity, and then you can create everything
Hmm.
that's to that brand identity. If you've done that research, then you know that you're pretty certain that what you put out there is not going to be it's not going to be off topic for your clients. It's going to fit them, and they're going to be more excited about it. I think there's
Yeah.
this real trend to kind of sound alike, as if that gives you like street cred or trust. But really, I think tapping into who our customers are as people, what do they care about, what gets them excited,
Oh,
can really
absolutely.
help create a marketing program that's a differentiator.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I think that so many manufacturers, like you said, get stuck in this. We have to sound corporate and professional, and while you do, yes, and that, but I think if you just like you said, go a little bit outside the box and you create something that's a little different. Um, like with us recruiting, we make our job descriptions. They're professional, but they also sound kind of fun, right? It's like, and we've had so many
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, your ad actually caught my attention because it didn't sound stuffy and like everyone else's, and we just make it sound just a little bit different, which we are, and and I think it just attracts a different type of a person, and you create that personal connection with people when you're just who you are.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the pieces that draws people in. I mean, there's all
Hmm.
parts of it too. You have to provide a good product at a good
Yep.
price. I mean,
Oh,
that's kind
absolutely.
of like that baseline. But once you get that, and maybe like, so this company that I work with, they're not the cheapest,
Yep.
and race to the bottom is not really the best way to go for business. But
No.
if there are other pieces, so we think about like, what are the other pieces of that product, and so we focus a lot on service and the knowledge. And that's what brings people back when they have the option. They could go, get a bid from somebody else, but they know that, but they're not going to get it's they may actually have to spend more time, things might not be correct, and it might take more time to fix it. It's not correct. And so you have to find all those other pieces of value, your differentiators within your market, and then really dial in and communicate those. And that can help set you apart and really help that kind of feeling of need. I mean, if you're doing commodities manufacturing, then sorry, there's not a lot that you can do to differentiate yourself. But if you're not manufacturing a commodity, then there's a lot of room for you to set yourself apart.
Yeah.
And I feel like, especially now, if your competitors aren't doing that, it's not going to take much.
Yeah, and I would disagree a little bit as far as commodity manufacturing, and to set yourself apart, it's not necessarily the widget that you're manufacturing. It's more the uh, people that you're working with, and how easy they are to to work with in quality and on time delivery. Everyone says, "Oh, quality on time delivery." It's actually doing it and then having that personal connection and rapport with your customer, which nobody really wants to talk about anymore because we're so in our computers every day, and kind of the personal touch just kind of went out the window. But I I found if you have a personal connection with somebody and you deliver, quality on time product and you get along with them and they feel like family, you're going to keep them forever. And you don't have to be the bottom of the barrel. Unless you're, going after auto and then, they want a price reduction for the next 20 years regardless of what everything else does. So, um, but yeah, it is an interesting marketing strategy and things that you've done.
Hmm.
Have you worked with any commodity manufacturers like machine shops or other fabricators, things like
Oh,
that?
I was thinking like if you're selling like crude oil or corn or something,
Oh
where
yeah,
like
yeah. Yeah, and yes, that is a little different. Uh, but yeah, even commodity, just like some machine widget that anyone can make.
No,
But
that's
yes,
actually, I think what you're saying applies even
yeah,
more to those companies. And that I would put, so if we're talking about like the customer, the journey that the customer goes on to like
hmm,
decide. And you think about it, you go, if you're buying like, say you're buying an appliance, you go through this same thing where you're
yep,
like, here's the problem, here's the thing I need, and then you're doing all the research. And what you're talking about is that delight stage, which is after, which is how do you keep somebody. So if I consider like the production team on the marketing team, they're the ones who are anybody who has anything to do with a client, which is almost everybody in the company has something to do with that experience.
yeah,
It costs so much more depending on your industry to get a new client than it does to maintain a client. And so all of those like after delivery touches are part, they need to be part of your
yeah,
marketing plan to help set you apart. Um, and that
yeah,
can be one of the most cost effective things.
yeah. And I think just the folks in your facility, right? So if we have a new customer coming in and looking at warehousing, and we're putting together their widget, and anyone really could do that. I mean, we set ourselves apart in different ways, but I know when they come in and they talk to Diego out on our floor, and they're like, "Oh, I know that this dude's like he lives to get things out on time, and he's going to bust his
Mm-hmm.
ass." And that now I have trust for this company, and it doesn't matter what our website looks like or whatever. That may get them in the door, but
Yeah.
100%, the people inside your organization and they feel comfortable with, and they have trust immediately. That's what keeps them around and really closes the deal.
Yeah, it's so important and is easy to overlook, or it's easy to cut that when you're thinking about like how do we cut our process or our time. It's
Hmm.
easy to cut those personal touches. And because like, the I'd say like your website or your ads, those are sort of like that first phase, that
Yeah.
awareness phase. If that's all you're doing and you don't have a way to nurture those relationships either before the sale or after the sale, then you're not your investment, you're not going to get the most out of that investment because
Hmm.
depending on your product. But if you're in B2B and if you're in manufacturing, you probably have a long sales cycle,
Hmm.
and those sales you're making are probably very big, so you need to
Yeah.
consider all of that.
Yeah. And it's so wild even today, how some transactions can come together that are, you know, they are big, and you may never meet those folks face to face. So a lot of what you're putting out there they build their trust off of just things that they see, like video or interview that they see, or a post that you do on LinkedIn, or some of your folks
Hmm.
that are posting on LinkedIn. So it is interesting every little thing that you put out there, how much of an impact it has today.
Yeah, and I think the frustrating thing is that nobody follows the same path. Like you can't say, okay, first they're going to see an ad and then they're going to download this white paper that we've written and then they're going to get all these emails. They're not going to do that. They're
Right.
going to ping pong around this whole thing. And so you have to set up your marketing and have everybody going to like accommodate for whatever somebody runs into, whatever path they want to do. And what we're seeing, just like you're saying, more and more people are doing that like marketing and sales process on their own. They
Mm-hmm.
before they want to talk to somebody, they want to gather a lot more information. So I think that's a real big challenge for companies to adjust to that. And how do you know what to put out there, and how do you help people with their research process and show up for them before they're even talking to you? I think, if they get on the phone with you, most salespeople are really good at their job. They're really personable. They
Mm-hmm.
have all of that. How can we? But people want to be so much farther down the line before they actually talk to somebody. How can we show up with that same energy of a really good salesperson throughout that process? So, that's something that I think companies, especially B2B manufacturers,
Mm-hmm.
need to be considering how that sales process is starting to change.
Yeah. Yeah, it is very true because it's so much different from every other industry, and I've always thought that if you go to a home builder, there's a very methodical path that people follow, and Kevin Oakley, guy that I work with, he owns a company now that's all home building marketing, and Kevin, I wish I could remember what your name or your company's name is off the top of my head, but I'll remember it here in a minute. But he's got it down to such a science that he knows every step that everyone takes, and every step that everyone takes before and after the Super Bowl, and it's wild. But he's been doing the data research um, for decades, and that was the industry that I worked in for a while. Was home building, and the marketing and the sales of that industry are just so methodical. And then you get into manufacturing, like you're saying, it's not. I mean, you can't. You're not tracking somebody. Well, they looked at this website, and then they visited this neighborhood, and then they did this, and then they talked to that person. It is ping pong everywhere, and I walked in on one of my engineers one time, and he's searching images, and I'm like, well, this is interesting, and I'm like, tell me more about how what you're doing and how you're doing it. And he's like, well, if I need a process, I'll search a process and I'll search an image, and then once I find an image that looks like what we need, then I'll dig into that because he's just very visual. And then he'll go and he'll read about that process, and it doesn't match what we need, or doesn't it? And it was really interesting to see how an engineer would research something, because that's who we're marketing towards, right? Is mainly engineers, and then the engineers telling the buyer, who to go to. But it was just really cool to see. Okay, well, this dude's looking at images, and now it's even more important how our images are tagged online, and and all that stuff. You really dig into how images are labeled and the alt tags and all that. Um,
Yep.
like, oh shit, now it's become even more real that engineers are searching this way. And then with AI, it's even more interesting. I mean, you could,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, you can get onto AI and say, okay, show me 5 of the 10 best whatever widget makers in a 10-mile radius, and it's better than what Google's doing at this point.
Yeah, and it's different.
Yeah.
So you bring up two really good points. And the AI point is important. We can't stick our head in the sand about
Sure.
this. We have to understand how it works and keep up with it. And it's a pain, and it's kind of frightening. But it's also
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
that there is some right now, there's some opportunity for a level playing field,
Hmm.
which I think is really great. The other thing that you bring up that I think is important is that the engineer who is searching your product is not often in B2B and in our sales processes is not the person who's saying, yes, this is what
Hmm.
we want. And so your marketing has to take in that account throughout that process. So it's not just like the decision maker of the engineer who's going online searching for solutions. Then you have to help that person make the case for the expense. And often, when you're doing that, especially that middle piece, you don't have the opportunity to talk to the main decision maker. And
Right.
so your content and your process has to take that into consideration of how am I going to appeal both to the end user, the person who's going to be using this, and then their decision, how do you educate them enough to communicate? Because what they see as benefit is different than what the executives or whoever's making that decision is going to see as a benefit. So,
Hmm.
how do you educate that end user on the benefits that are meaningful to their supervisor for them to say yes and sign off on this product?
Right.
And so, I think that's a unique issue to our industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like with the AI piece, it is here to stay. I mean, it is scary. It's extremely useful. I gave a ton of pushback on it, and I've talked about this on many shows. But my buddy Brooks challenged me in I think October to use it for 30 days and then report back to him because he owns an AI company. And I'm like, all right, whatever, dude. And I did. I used it, and I was able to accomplish more in a day than I probably could in 5. With a
It's
couple.
very useful.
Yeah, but you have to be careful, and there has been some things that I've caught that are like, oh well, that's not right, and
Yep.
but it's really frightening how well it learns about you and your mannerisms
Yeah.
and your tone and all those things and how you research and putting it all together. It's
Hmm.
wild. And so it'll be very interesting how we can utilize that in a marketing aspect.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really good. So you have to be careful. It's really good at aggregating data and finding trends,
Hmm.
but you don't want to put in data that is identifying. So you have to scrub your lists of
Hmm.
any identifying data, and then you can come in and ask it. And it's so great at finding trends. It's so great at discovering if you can get good data. And that's all what it is, especially like
Hmm.
what you're talking about if we're all on e-commerce and we're doing everything online, it's fairly easy. It's getting harder to track that. The third-party cookies are going away. Third-party data is getting a little iffy, and this is getting into the weeds,
Sure.
marketing nerdiness. But so even that is getting trickier, especially like where traffic is coming from. It's getting skewed. There's a great Rand Fishkin did a great re- kind of like review into what's happening with search and data, third party data. Um, so too bad. The golden age of tracking everybody on the internet and getting really good data is sadly and happily behind us. But I think what that means is instead of just tricking people, you just have to be honest and tell the truth and put out really good and useful content.
Yes.
I
Yep.
feel like I'm excited about this because I think it means that if you spend time, you put out really good information, then you're going to win. And it's not going to
Yeah.
be whoever has the most money to trick the most people.
Yeah.
It all goes back to authenticity and being useful, being of service. Like that's really how I view marketing. Marketing should be of service. It should be of
Yeah.
service to our customers. It should be of service to our C-suite. It should be of service to our sales team. Um, it should be bringing the company together. And I think we're seeing that pendulum swing back. Although who knows what will be invented next.
Yeah.
But it's a really interesting age of marketing that we're in, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think the more you can educate your potential customer, the better off you are, and I and it's always been interesting that so many people felt, well, if I give too much information away, what do they need me for? It's like, no, whatever. I don't agree with that at all. We posted some stuff online 3 years ago of us cutting a certain material with kiss cutting, and everyone said that it couldn't be done, and we just I took a video on my phone and I posted it on LinkedIn, and people were freaking out because they're like, "Why did you post that?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" It showed how we did it. We're able to do it. We want everyone to know that we can do it. They're like, "Well, what if somebody can do it now that, blah blah blah." And I'm like, "I don't care. There's so much there's so much opportunity out there that if we helped a competitor out to be able to do something, pretty what I felt easy to do when everyone's telling us that we can't do it and we were able to do it, then good for them. But we were the first ones, and that video is always going to be the first one out there. So,
Yeah.
I've always just had that mindset, and there's so much opportunity out there. It's like, really, who are you really hurting yourself? Are you really giving away a secret? But I don't know. That's my opinion on it.
Well, I think you're spot on. It's showcasing what you can do, and I like that. It's the opposite of that scarcity mindset where we're in abundance,
Hmm.
and it could be that you team up with this competitor, or you
Absolutely.
get so many orders that you have somebody to pass them on to, and
Yep.
then vice versa.
Yep.
I think you do have to walk the line, which is something that if you have like real trade secrets or the way that you do
Oh
things, that
yes.
is but doing things like that, really showing, you should you need to show how things and that's what people are interested in.
Right.
And that can build trust. People seeing that video see the competency that you have, the
Yeah.
ingenuity. um, yeah, so I think sharing, being open, being truthful,
Yep.
being authentic is the way to go. If it's just like feels the best in business. um, Everything that you've said about trust, I mean, that's the most important piece. That's really what we're building.
Right.
Relationships don't happen, sales don't happen without trust.
Yeah. Totally agree. And I do think that people, part of that is just being, like you said, authentic, authentic. Geez, boo. I think that maybe that uh, that snowmobile crash hurt my brain. Um, but if you're taking a simple video instead of paying a big production team to come in and do a big fancy video, there's another video we did, and it was just again on my cell phone, and I was messing around with TikTok, and I'm not saying TikTok's like the best thing in the world by any means, but we had like over 1 million views with the simple machining process with these parts falling out of the machine, and and it was just a cheesy little video, and I'm like, holy cow! Now we can really dig into that and say, okay, out of 1 million views, was it all like 12-year-old boys that are interested in machining and welding and things like that, and no none of them are really validated leads? Well, yeah, maybe, but it maybe there's one person out there that needed that in it, and you got in front of them, or that kid ends up, going into manufacturing, totally different subject is, well, maybe now that kid's more interested in manufacturing instead of, going and sitting behind a desk at a bank. Um, so there's all those different aspects of, the things that we put out there, and it's not all about, getting business. I think a lot of in our industry is if we can put things out there that kids can really say, okay, now this is an industry that I love, and I don't need to go to a 4-year college and learn accounting. I really want to be a machinist, or I really want to be a welder. We've gotten away from that from society as well.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about all the possible waves of what you like, what we were talking about before, content can
Yep.
serve more than one purpose.
Yep.
I think if you have a plan, and something that a big trend that we're seeing within the market is the swing back towards brand identity.
Yeah.
Um, and so doing something like that, it's building trust, and it's also something that we're seeing is that like I think it's 95 per only 5% of your market is looking to buy, is like active. And
Hmm.
so what are you going to do for that 95% that's not in market looking,
Hmm.
but would be potential customers? And that's where that brand comes in. So maybe you put out that video, and somebody who is a machinist or who is an engineer or whatever, they're scrolling by and they see that, or LinkedIn maybe more
Yeah.
targeted. I think there's like, where do you
Oh
put
yeah.
your resources?
Yep.
And so it's priming that pump so that when they are ready, most people are now going, they're not searching for like, what's the answer to this thing? They're searching a brand name first.
Yeah.
So if you can get your brand name out there, trade shows we're just seeing the pendulum swing back up to where reputation is becoming more and more important. People are searching brands instead of solutions,
Hmm.
because brands are doing a good job of showing that they are that solution no matter what. So all of that, but doing it thoughtfully, like in a way that you know, we know we know what the ripple effects are of this content that we're putting out, and we know how we're going to repurpose it a million times. That's like the ideal.
Hmm.
There's also room for what you're doing experimentation. Let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not just like this really structured, boring, everything is what we do. There's got to be, I feel like marketing is it's like creativity and it's a science experiment, right? So we have
Yeah.
a hypothesis, we have an idea of what's going to happen, and then we test that hypothesis and then we draw
Yeah.
conclusions from it.
And you might have to test it 5 or 12 times.
Yeah.
So a lot of consistency in what we do. And if you're just shotgunning everything out and you never really figure out what
Yeah.
works, you have to do something. It's like the old school email marketing. You'd have to send 12
Mhm.
emails before you get one reply. And folks that are sending, even today, I mean, email marketing still works, but if you send one email off and you expect a reply, you're foolish.
No.
You gotta send 12, and maybe they say, leave me alone, never contact me again. Or a year later, somebody emails back and says, hey, you've been emailing me a year. I changed my role. I didn't have a need for it then, but I do now. And
Yeah, that's
we've
that
we've seen
nurture.
that. Yeah, absolutely. But
So you
yeah, yeah, you have to
you
deliver
know,
good content though.
yeah, what's funny is, so every year we hear that email is dead. The email is dying, email is dead, right?
Hmm.
If you look at over the last like 10 years, all the different like forms of marketing, you see these huge like spikes. And
Yep.
email is just kind of going along, just steady, consistent.
Yep.
Email marketing consistently works, but it is a bit of a numbers game, and you have to have good content for that to work. You
Yeah.
can't just put stuff out to put stuff out,
Yeah.
and that takes time, and it takes a team. A lot of times I think a fallacy that people try to sell you on marketing is that it doesn't take extra time because they're trying to like get you to do, there's like, what's the man behind the curtain? But it takes a lot of time it takes it can take 3 to 6 months to start seeing any ROI come from your campaign,
Hmm.
sometimes longer depending on what it is. And it takes effort to do it
Yeah.
consistently. And I don't think that people talk about that enough. It's hard. It's hard work, and it is a significant investment.
Well, and I think so many marketers out there want to make their customer feel like they have the magic stick, the wand that's going to fix everything, and they're afraid that they're like, oh, this could take 12 months for you to get anything out of it, and they're like, yes, and I just think that so many marketers, unlike what you're saying, they're afraid to tell somebody that because somebody like me is going to go, no, I needed a immediate return on my investment, just like a
Hmm.
machine. We bring a machine in, we know day one it's making X number of dollars. Why is it marketing like that? And I think that they do. They're just afraid to talk about those things, and it's all about the expectation up front of what you can expect from day one to
Yeah,
day 365. And if your program's not working in the first 6 months or the first year, then something is broken. You,
yep,
yep,
yes, it is. That Yeah, I love that machine analogy, because the other thing is that you invest in a machine, but you can't just, I mean, maybe soon it can just be a robot and do whatever it needs,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to work that machine, right? Somebody
Mm-hmm.
has to be working that machine. If it breaks, you have to fix it. And I think that's the other thing that people think, that they get like a marketing plan or something and they're like, great, magic will
Yeah.
work, but you have to continually work, and somebody has to be running the thing and
Yeah.
like investing in the thing. And I think that's an important piece, but I think, yeah, some people just, they're trying to sell you marketing, they're trying to sell you the magic. It's not magic. It's really not.
Right.
It's just, it's anybody could do it who's interested in doing
Yeah.
it. There's nothing super special about it. Um, and I think that's really important, but it is like a piece, it's an investment,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a bottom line expense, it's an investment. And so there's only so much, if you want to get it done faster, you have to invest more money.
Yeah.
So there's like, you can have speed, you can have
Yeah.
quality, and you can have, you can't have all three things. So
Yeah. What's the cheesy quote? Do you want it cheap, fast, or on time? But you can only pick two.
yeah, yes, that's it.
But all right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. We're getting close to the end of our time, and I know that you have a crazy busy schedule, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing these things with us. We touched on a lot of things that we haven't touched on before. So we've had a few different marketing folks on, and everyone has their different spin, and I think everyone, it's like anything else, whatever you're doing is working, but I think the consistent message that we hear from everyone is just consistency and building trust and delivering good content, and
Yeah.
just how you go about it, and then how big you want to nerd out over the numbers and track everything.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's a big piece. But thank you so much. This has been
yeah.
such a great conversation.
Well, Katie, tell us how our listeners can get in touch with you and all those fun things. And again, we'll have everything in the bio and the transcript that we post and all that fun stuff.
Sure thing. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Katie Smith Wild Path Consulting, because there's a million Katie Smiths out there.
I'm
Or you
sure.
can check out my website, which is followthewildpath.com, or email me, Katie at followthewildpath.com. And yeah, I love to nerd out about this stuff, and love to make connections, and I love hearing what kinds of things people are manufacturing. So
Yeah,
get in
absolutely. Well,
touch.
yeah, and I'll be back out in Montana in March, so we'll have to hook up.
Yeah, that would be fun.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for coming on.
All right. Have a good one.
All right, bye bye.
Thanks everyone for joining us for this episode of MFG Monkey. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, please email them to us at info@mfgmonkey.com.